This week on the Legion Clubhouse, things get weirder than normal.
They were the heroes from the future, teenagers protecting the universe from those that would sow the seeds of chaos. Each had unique powers and abilities, and though they often had their differences, they came together to save the day as the Legion of Superheroes. Now, you can be a part of their adventures and learn the history of the future in the Legion Clubhouse.
So I mentioned last time on the Legion Clubhouse that I really kind of enjoyed the conspiracy theory that was playing out in the first or second the two installments of the Starfinger undercover thing with Chameleon Boy and all of that stuff. But this time, things get a little bit maybe too much, I think. And we'll get to the too much here in just a moment. But we do find out that there are more people than just Saturn Girl and Brainiac 5 and potentially a couple of the other Legion members, possibly Cosmic Boy also involved in this. But we also find out that Duo Damsel is part of whatever the heck is going on.
Yep. And then it does start to bring up an important question. What do the Legionnaires that we have absolutely seen have in common? What do Brainiac 5 and Duo Damsel and Mon-El and Saturn Girl have in common? What could they possibly be mad about?
I don't know, the November 2024 elections?
That's probably it. That's exactly it. But
could they all be mad that their best friend Superboy is no longer in continuity, and so they're mucking with the time stream?
Well, I mean, Mon-El thought he was a brother, and Brainiac 5 dedicated his whole life to trying to, to redeem his family line. Of course, you remember Duo Damsel completely in love with Superboy back in the adventure days. Yeah. I'm just saying. Possible.
Yeah.
I will say this, though. You know what makes me mad?
What's that?
Fat shaming. Fat shaming Tellus. Because Duo Damsel's like, Tellus waddled into my office. I'm like, oh, no, you did not.
I mean, waddle isn't necessarily a fat shaming thing. A platypus
it's a fat shaming thing.
Waddles. A penguin waddles. A duck waddles. A waddle is just a rocking back and forth walking motion.
Yeah, it's fat shaming because you know what else we find out later? Tellus, who, by the way, the chunkiest Legionnaire and the one with the tiniest feet.
I think Block is bigger than Tellus.
Well, he's bigger, but Tellus is more rounded. Tellus's room consists of a fishbowl. Yeah. They couldn't even put up a force field and let him have a room full of hydrogen. No, it's a fishbowl.
But maybe that's what he liked.
A little pirate in there. No, come on.
I think he likes it that way. I mean, I thought every Legionnaire got to design their own room, and his might have been, hey, listen, just give me a self-contained sphere of liquid that I can put my terrarium and my little, what are those bottom feeder creatures that people put in their aquariums? Let me give some of those and some snails and
Lemora, and one of those little chests that the water goes and then
maybe that's. I mean, there is bubbles blowing in the background, so maybe. I'm not really too concerned about Tellus and waddling. Well, because again, you also think of waddling when we talk about ducks and other things. Aquatic creatures, and so Tellus living in the water could also be aquatic creature. So I don't think that this is an intentional, an intentional fat shaming thing, like we see in other places. Again, from all people, from Duo Damsel, who is married to a fat person. So I don't think that is the nastiness that you think it is.
I definitely think that there is some nastiness in kind of I don't know if I want to say a stratification or maybe a hierarchy within the Legion where Brainiac and Duo Damsel and the other Adventure Comics originals are kind of one strata, and then you see Magnetic Kid and Tellus and weirdly Censor Girl, even though she's part of that group. She's one of these old school people, and they're kind of treat it, and Brainiac comes out and says, well, this is what happens when you have true telepaths. It's almost like the newer members are being treated as second-class Legionnaires.
Yeah, I wrote a comment here that, we are getting close to the 90s. We're at 1988.
We are.
Which means that we have to make all of our clicks extreme.
Element Lad points it out. Element Lad worries about the team's future and, about the fragmentation and these strange things that are happening. And he's right.
But at the same time, the Legion has always been this way. The Legion has always been cliquish. The Legion has always been sass talky. Now, back in the 50s and 60s, their sass talk was a little bit more toned down, but it was definitely like, oh, the girls can't do that because we're the boys, yo. And so that is, maybe not as extreme as the 90s cliquishness that is coming about, but the Legion has always been that way. And I think that is, regardless of who the creator is, or who's writing it, a lot of them are drawing on their experiences of what was it to be a teenager, and the pretty girl didn't like me, or the jocks were jock bros, and whatever. And so they insert their own remembrances of those times in here. And so it's always been that way. I think that, again, here we're just amping it up. And as I mentioned in the last episode, we're like 10 episodes away from 5 years later. And that may be that may be revealing as well. So just kind of keep that in mind. But the part that really, really got to me, and the part where I'm like, okay, I think they've gone a little bit too far, is when we take Mon-El and they literally give him Silver Age Superman powers. Whatever conspiracy is going on, and I will say, I will be very mad if this all turns out to be some surprise birthday party, and that's what it's all about, the final test for the Legionnaires, and congratulations, you all passed, and now you're all official members, and we did this, ha ha ha. That wouldn't put it past the Legion because they've done that before. But here, whatever crazy machine Brainiac is trying to fire up, he needs the power of a dwarf star to do it. And the only way to do that, and first of all, there's a lot of science that's wrong in this issue, but the only way to do that is for Mon-El to plunge himself into the heart of a star until inside that star he can find a little white dwarf star. And then he drags this little white dwarf star, which, weird science here, a white dwarf star that is the size of a couple of basketballs. The density of that star would be so great that it would be very hard for Mon-El to even escape the gravitational pull of that. Not impossible, but very, very hard. And yet he just grabs it, tucks it under his arm, and is like, I'm going to push this super hot, dense ball of radioactive energy to Earth. And it's not going to disrupt or disturb anything. And in fact, when I pass through the polymer shield, thus ruining any chance of the resale value of Earth and sending my kids to college, no one on Earth is going to suffer because whatever reason. And at that point, whatever else is going on in this issue, I'm just like, no, that is not how this works. And yes, I know we can sit there and say, yes, it's comic books, let it go. But literally this time, you can't let it go because they just spent an entire crisis depowering Superman, so he can't do that. And then they let Mon-El do that.
I mean, well, first of all, I think the telepathic screaming that she hears is actually the ghost of the physicist Chandrasekhar, who's all like, no, that's not how any of this works. But you do also have to think about, I don't know physically what size a white dwarf would be, but I know
certainly
that theoretically.
I mean, so once a white star condenses down enough, it becomes a black hole, right? The size that they are depicting it here, it's almost at black hole size, right? The point where it would become that way. Even a pulsar, Stargrave, would be so dense as to, and even if that were, and I don't remember what they say the size of pulsars are, they've got to be fairly large because we still can detect them in space. Still really big. And if we can detect stuff that's millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of light years away from Earth, it's not something you just tuck under your arm and you bring home to mom.
Oh, not at all. And, you know, traditionally speaking, and I say traditional like it means something, typically a white dwarf, most of the white dwarves that we know of, and I think there's only like
7 of them. Yeah, 7 of them.
Yeah, are basically
Doc, grumpy,
the size of the Earth. And the smaller they get, the denser they get, and the
that's
more
what I've been saying. Yeah.
I'm just saying, Mon-El would have destroyed the planet long before he
that's what I'm saying.
The shield.
He burns it. He brings it through the solar system, and nothing is disrupted. He brings it across the galaxy, and nothing happens. He throws it into Brainiac's lab, which, catches fire and starts to explode, if not for a tesseract there to contain it in another dimension. Maybe just take the tesseract to the location, contain it in there, and then bring the tesseract to Earth. Maybe. I don't know. It
certainly does seem like the kind of thing that might keep your conspiracy maybe a little more.
Yeah, right. Because every Magnetic Kid and whoever else, Telos and Sensor Girl, all these people should be, hey, did you guys just notice a giant white dwarf star crashing into Earth right at our very location? Maybe we should go check that out. You
guys see a star? No, it's cool.
Yeah, you're right. It's very hard to maintain a conspiracy or a secret if you're bringing a giant white dwarf star to Earth. So,
and I feel
I still love the conspiracy theory. Don't get me wrong. I still love this thing about, what's going on? Have you figured it out, dear reader? I love all of that. But this whole, I'm trying to contain a white dwarf in a tesseract, and then my tesseract blows up, and my science experiment has failed. Just kind of took me out of all of the mystery.
I feel like this whole issue, and to a lesser degree, the recent run of issues have been that way about powers, though, because we do have a scene in this issue where Sensor Girl and the boys, Telos and Magnetic Kid, are like, "Ooh, we have to be secrety," and she creates this shield that no one can hear, no one can psychically see, no one can magically hear. And Magnetic Kid's, how'd you do that? She's like, does it matter? And I'm like, wait. And to some degree, that shows a little bit of disdain for me, I feel, as a reader. And maybe even more than having, Mon-El bring the medicine ball of pure gravity and throw it into Brainiac's bedroom. Because, that's dumb science, and that's certainly crazy, stupid Legion science, but this doesn't even try and make an attempt. We have at this point 50 years of, Mon-El is totally powered by the yellow sun, and so he has the power of a sun in his pants. But Sensor Girl uses a new power, completely new, never before seen power, and somebody mentions it, and they go to the trouble of having her just go, hand wave, it's fine.
Yeah, we've talked before about powering up the villains. The Mon-El and the Sensor Girl is, now we are powering up the heroes. And, if you're a D&D player, you understand that you're going to level up and have godlike abilities, and then your game's over. The problem with comic books, or the problem with TV shows or movies where you continually do that, you can only go so far before Captain America. It's ridiculous that he is holding on to a building and to a helicopter at the same time and not being ripped apart. And then he's going and fighting one of the greatest villains in all of the universe, and he doesn't get bruised or injured at all. At some point you pass that level of believability, I think, for any hero or for any villain. And speaking of villains, Starfinger's star ring is also one of those things that is getting a little bit ridiculous. It can do anything. It can do everything. It can contain multitudes, literally. And I like Chameleon Boy going in and doing espionage squad stuff because he wants to bring Starfinger down. He is a bad guy, As I've mentioned before, I kind of like this idea of let's make Starfinger a recurring villain that can vex the heroes, and bringing him back quite a bit and letting him be that mob boss level character that the Legion has to constantly deal with. Just this annoying presence in the background, like what's his name, Sal Maroni from Batman. It's just like one of those just annoyances that you always have to deal with for a couple of issues, and then you think you've gotten rid of him or you've brought him to justice, and then he escapes again. But here he's also starting to get powers and abilities far beyond those that were ever prescribed to him.
Yeah, and the worst part, and this is something very important, when you go and if you read the Who's Who entry for Starfinger, it basically hand waves his whole ring. It's just like, oh yeah, he's got this ring. It's probably magic. We don't know. But I do agree with you on one thing, the fact that he's too powerful. Honestly, his first appearance should have been his last. I feel like this guy to actually challenge in any way the modern Legion of superheroes is kind of ridiculous. Even though we do have this whole thing where, oh, here's my arranger and here's my treasurer and here's my assembler.
He's got this whole corporate structure for his little mob secret society.
And, you know, once again, LaRocque and
so is DeCarlo doing the inks? Is DeCarlo doing the inks here? Okay.
DeCarlo's doing the inks. 3 guys who should be important. They're completely dull. They're completely generic. And I thought at first, oh, well, they have like a cool matching visor thing. But apparently the visor thing is just that Starfinger himself is incredibly bright.
Yeah.
And glows. So I'm like, oh, they're not even wearing the visors to be cool. They're just guys in shirts running around.
Yeah. Yeah, they're mooks, right? They're the mob.
They have names.
I mean, does it really matter? It really doesn't matter. The only one that matters is the fact that Chameleon Boy has been tasked with stealing a Legion ring. And he's like, oh, well, I'll just go into SP headquarters and I will replicate my ring using their replicator machine, but I'll put some impurities in it because Starfinger has figured out that, the flight rings emit a certain frequency. And if we can use our death ray to tune into this frequency, we can kill all the Legionnaires just like that. And of course, Chameleon Boy doesn't want to do that. And of course, he's trying to figure out the structure and get close to Starfinger so he can take him down. But then by the end of the issue, we find out that someone else is also inside Starfinger's sphere of influence. And it turns out to be Colossal Boy, ?
I mean, Chameleon Boy does not see people the way we do. Remember, Chameleon Boy's powers,
this ink and art style.
That's true. Yeah, this heavy ink. He actually perceives people partly with his antennae, which allow him to duplicate them.
Different things. Yeah.
And Colossal Boy is his oldest and dearest friend.
So then
I believe Cam when he says this is Colossal Boy.
Sure. So that then brings up the question for the reader, which does kind of leave it on a nice cliffhanger for this issue. Is this Colossal Boy who's been under the control of Starfinger for a long time, and that the Colossal Boy that we've been seeing wheelchairing around at the Legion is a inside job man? Or has Colossal Boy also gone undercover with some crazy, I am a cyborg scientist, I can do whatever you need, and has also infiltrated Starfinger's organization?
I think, I would say at this point, if I were reading this cold, my first thought would be Colossal Boy has gone undercover as the late Professor Stephen Hawking. And that is literally, that's not me being rude or terrible or horrible. So, if it sounds like that, forgive me. The character is a doctor who speaks with an electronic voice and floats around and does not move. Most of his body is covered with metal. And I feel like that whole moment where we're like, it's Chameleon Boy, it's Colossal Boy. I think what this is meant to be where did Colossal Boy go after he was injured by Starfinger? He did the same thing Chameleon Boy did.
Yeah.
Now, why is Cam so obsessed with Starfinger?
I don't think that it is
because.
Well, it could be because we have seen that Chameleon Boy and Colossal Boy are very, very good friends, and that Starfinger, during that big incident, tore up Colossal Boy's leg, and Colossal Boy is pretty bummed about that, and he doesn't get to partake in adventures, and Yara is always shooing Chameleon Boy away, and so, this could just be Chameleon Boy going, dang it, this guy hurt my friend, and I'm going to take him down. And then he puts on his sunshades, and we click on some 80s electronica driving pulse music, and it's like, this week on Miami Vice. And it could be very much that, or it could be that they've teamed up together and have recognized that this guy is a bigger threat to the Legion than even the Legion is recognizing it. And so they're doing some preemptive stuff, going behind Polar Boy's back, which is also problematic from a team dynamic structure. So those would be my guesses on that. Or it could just be tying it back around into the big conspiracy theory, and everybody's in on it.
And the Legion is fragmenting. I would say that two things
explains 5 years later.
It really does. Polar Boy's leadership is part of the problem, but it's building in such a way that it almost doesn't feel like it's an intentional plot point. If that makes sense. This feels like everybody's mad about Polar Boy and half the team's over here, and we're like, okay, we're gonna avenge a dead guy, and 3 people are undercover with Starfinger. Nobody knows where Ultra Boy is. We're pretty sure Wildfire was last seen on the beach at Daytona for MTV's Spring Break 3086. But yeah, it feels like the team is really coming apart. And as we come up to what is theoretically a big, groundbreaking, blah, 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 50th issue extravaganza, you have to ask yourself, are they setting up a big new reset, or
they are.
Is it all just is it just flying off the rails, which is kind of how it feels and has felt for a few issues now. We're just
well, but we've talked about this, right? Ever since the crisis, what do you do with the Legion? Because how do they exist? How do they not exist? We'll be introduced to Valor not too far off to kind of cover over some of that stuff. It's really kind of confusing, especially if, and again, DC at this point is very much, everything must be part of continuity. Everything must be in order. As we start to roll out the events, the things that happen in Aquaman affect the Wonder Woman book, and things that happen in the Wonder Woman book affect the Green Lantern book, blah, 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 blah. And I can just see poor Paul Levitz just sitting in the corner going, what about the Legion of Superheroes? And everybody just throws their hands up in the air, cursing and crying and screaming, if these things weren't great sellers, we just cancel that damn book. That's kind of how I feel DC looks at the Legion right now, as this problem, a real problem for everything that comes after post-crisis. And so by saying that things are going off the rails, yeah, I think you're right. And that's what leads to the big things that are coming up. And eventually, 2 years, 3 years after crisis, the big reset. And we get a whole new, all different, all new, but the same Legion of Superheroes. I mean, I'm not wrong.
You're not. A little cynical, but not wrong.
I mean, I think I'm a bit more cynical because I've had to spend many, many years looking at these comic publishers doing it again and again and again and again, trying to do the exact same thing with less return on their investment each time. And so that frustrates everybody. And I don't think that there is an easy solution for superhero comics, because as I think either you and I talked about it, or I talked about it the last time I did a solo show, when you see something that works, you want to do it again and again. This is why we lead into the vampire storyline at Marvel leads right into the Doctor Doom storyline, the Sorcerer Supreme, One World Under Doom line, which will then lead into the next big thing. And all of the comics are intertwined into that because, hey, these things sell. And if we can get people to buy into this entire series, they're going to buy all these books because look what it did in DC back in 1986. Surely it will work today, 50 years later. And it's just, it doesn't really work that way. And so when you have something that comes out of the blue, like the Legion of Superheroes was just a LaRocque comic, a LaRocque storyline when they came out, and everybody was just really took to it. The same way when you have a Miles Morales character that's introduced, or when you have, I don't know, what's another big thing that gets introduced. It's Harley Quinn would be another perfect example of something that nobody really thought about. Bruce Timm and Paul Dini created this character. It took the world by storm. They had to force her into the comic books. She did great in the comic books, but DC owns the rights. So let's create Punchline. Let's create, what was that? Is it White Rabbit? Let's create White Rabbit. Let's create all of these characters that they're trying to replicate that lightning, or trying to catch that lightning in a bottle again. And it just diminishing returns each time. I like White Rabbit more than I like Punchline. And, I don't know what they've done since then, but, it's that is the problem that we're going to see going forward from here. And it's just super frustrating.
It is.
What do you think, dear listeners? Do you also think that it's super frustrating that, and again, especially for the Legion fans, where they're like, oh, we'll just reboot the Legion. We'll give them all similar names. And Legion has been rebooted in the last 15 years, like 3 times in the last 15 years. That's like every 5 years you get a new Legion book that's launched, and everyone gets super excited. And then after the first issue, it just drops off the cliff. And I don't know the solution. I don't know the answer to that.
Bring them all back, put them all together, and have the Legion of Legions.
Or just have them battle to the death. That'll be the next
Battle Royale. That's been done.
Hey, you want a dark and gritty DC comic that's deserving of the Black Label? Definitely do that. I mean,
I have never wanted that.
No, nobody wants that. I don't want that. But if you're trying to do something, you go and you figure out what are the top characters from each of the different versions or iterations, and then you battle royale it out until you get those survivors, and then they form their extreme cliques, and then they have their new adventures of the Legion, and it's got everybody's favorite in there. I'm sure this version of Wildfire would be part of that. I'm sure this version of Brainiac 5 would be part of that. I think XS, and I think the version of Shrinking Violet from the Archie Legion would be part of, would be a favorite. Maybe even Valor over Mon-El.
Oh,
maybe
blasphemy.
You think? I don't know. I'm trying to think, because I know that they tried to, from my remembrance of 30 years ago, tried to make Valor kind of this blank slate that they could kind of do everything with, although he was kind of flavored, Superman, but not, by still removing all the Bob Cobb stuff, but still making him Daxam trapped in amber until Jurassic Park was able to revive him. But I'm trying to think of, out of the last couple of ones,
the building blocks alive.
I'm trying to think of the last couple of ones, who would be the most interesting ones. Maybe the Gold Lantern from Brian Bendis's run.
I would say you definitely want a Gold Lantern. I think the Volume 3, the WKRP Legion, I would love, I don't think she's the most popular, to see Gazelle. I feel like that iteration of Triplicate Girl has a hook that none of the other Triplicate Girls have.
The one where she was away for so long that they ostracized her. I do like that one. Yeah. I like that
one.
Where
everybody on Karg is her.
Yes.
And the reason that she's not on Karg anymore was she was away from Karg long enough.
Yeah, long enough where she's not part of them. Yeah.
Her own people, herselves won't accept her.
Yeah. And I like the version of Colossal Boy where he's giant, but he can shrink down to normal human size. I like that version of Colossal Boy for whatever reason.
Lad.
Yeah, I like that version for whatever reason. So I think something like that could be done, but I think that would be even more divisive than just saying, hey, we've got a whole new Legion with a whole new look and a whole new backstory, and we're going to spend a year and a half telling you the entire future of the DCU, and then we're going to let this series play out for it. Did it even make 12 issues and then disappear?
It did 12 issues, and then they did a 6-issue crossover with Justice League.
Oh,
so
yeah, I remember
literally,
that.
Legion made fewer appearances than it had members.
Yeah. So I don't know. Listeners, what do you think? What would be a good solution? And the answer isn't just bring back this version of the Legion, because this version of the Legion that we're reading right now is not the same Legion that launched. And Paul
Did you
Levitz,
know that about 3 months ago, they brought back this version of the Legion?
Oh, they did? Where?
In Justice League or Justice Society of America. This Legion popped up because the new member of the JSA, the secret Legionnaire, turned out to be Mordru.
Oh, really? Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. And this Legion came back to fight the Justice Society about Mordru.
Ah, interesting. I didn't read that. So that's interesting.
You didn't miss much.
Well, but then also with this new absolute DC universe that they have, where everything's been infected with dark side energy, there's also this dark version of the Legion that was introduced in the final pages of that Justice League story. Remember where Booster goes through the portal and he winds up in this other dimension and he's like, oh no. And then we see all the Legion descending with Darkseid laughing in the background. So you got that version of the Legion that could also make an appearance someday, but probably won't.
Yeah, that is ostensibly this Legion corrupted. I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah, that's the whole idea, is that Darkseid energy has corrupted everything, including the origin of how these heroes came to be. So, yeah, who knows? I mean, if you say it's the corrupted version of this Legion, it's that by definition is not this Legion. Right.
Time, space, and dimension. Yeah. Well, God help us. It's been about 20 minutes since we've seen the Rand's family origin. So it's about time they set us up once more.
Yeah.
If you enjoy the show, we would appreciate your support. You can find out more and become a Legion Clubhouse member at patreon.com/major spoilers.
All right, finally we get to the WTF portion of this episode. And I will be saying that for the next 3 episodes because
okay.
WTF, man.
Okay, so here's the deal. Let's abstract this. In 1984, when DC brought their Baxter line of comics out, and they took their 2 best-selling titles, New Teen Titans and Legion of Superheroes, relaunched them with direct sales only reboots. This version of the Legion Volume 3, the Legion was one of the most popular books that DC had, and they kept saying, hey, why don't we do a spinoff? Hey, why don't we do a spinoff? Hey, why don't we do a spinoff?
And they tried. They did it with Karate Kid. They did it with
Karate Kid was years before
Magnetic Boy Magnetic Boy and
Cosmic Boy.
Yeah, that travel back in time thing.
Mm-hmm. But one thing that the Legion's future has generally lacked are rival heroes who aren't Legionnaires. And so what they did was they went back to 1968, Adventure 375. The Wanderers, you remember the Wanderers from episode
just that
12,
one episode.
Yep, those one guys. So here's what they did. They showed up, they got hypnotized, they fought the Legion, they lost. Bouncing Boy saved the day. Then they were part of the massive group of cameos that were literally Dave Cockrum messing around during the wedding of Bouncing Boy and Duo Damsel.
Right.
You remember when they were on Mars? So John Jones and Tars Tarkas were hanging out together in the background.
Yeah.
And then they did a 2-panel cameo during the Great Darkness saga. You remember during the Great Darkness, everyone was fighting. The substitute heroes were out. The Wanderers were out. The heroes of Lalor.
See, right there, you said That should have been the spinoff series.
Well, there's only 4 of them. And
That's okay.
also, this is written by Doug Moench. And this
I
is
do like Doug Moench. Don't get me wrong.
Moench.
I like Doug Moench, especially when he was on Batman. He did really good stuff there.
And that's the thing about Doug Moench. There's like 2 Doug Moenches. There's the one who
one that does really good stuff, and then there's the Wanderers.
Well, here's the thing. Doug Moench is an experimental artist, writer, whichever. Yes. So they show up, 3 appearances in 20 years, and now they're dead. This Wanderers, number 1, and I will say this to you, and I want you to understand, the Wanderer series runs 13 issues. And back in the day, we had the argument, in 2022, we had the argument about why weren't we doing every episode of Karate Kid? Yeah. And I'm like, because they suck.
Yeah.
The Wanderers makes Karate Kid look like Jack Kirby and Alan Moore working together on a revamp of Batman that's going to sell 1 billion copies. It's just
this first issue, sets up the premise. Hey, you're clones and you're clones of clones and memory transference. Someday we'll use this idea over at Marvel Comics and set up a whole secret island of Krakoa where we can instantly revive dead mutants. But that's, in the future. So, you've got that set up, but then it just goes into some weird, trippy stuff. Like this woman, one of the characters has a dream about what has happened to her in the past. And suddenly she becomes pregnant and a gremlin jumps out of her body. And then she wakes up and it's like she's never been pregnant before. And there's another guy standing there witnessing that whole scenario and doesn't really. And then it's like, okay, I guess we should just go back to bed now. It's like, what the heck am I reading? What the heck am I reading?
That woman is not physically pregnant. Her name is Psyche.
No. Yeah, but it's just like it goes into these weird, like, altered states. If Altered States was a comic book, the Wanderers would be really close to that.
Honestly, that's not a bad take, because this book is meant to be weird and disturbing in a way that I think the Legion both isn't and kind of can't be. But this is also, we talked about extreme. When you talk about 90s comics.
This is 90s comics right here. This is
90s comics really start in the mid-80s.
My favorite horrible comic, X-Mutants, and not X-Mutants, but X-Mutants.
Right.
This feels like X-Mutants.
I feel like X-Mutants has better art.
Oh, no, it most definitely does. Ron Lim did an excellent job during that run. But this book doesn't know what it wants to be. Is it a spinoff of the Legion of Superheroes? Is it the Black Hole? Is it, Altered States? Is it high fantasy because we've got a little elf guy running around with a sword? It doesn't know what it wants to be.
Yeah. And something that you see that is actually going to become a big deal in the 90s is we have these 7 characters. 6 of them survive, but 7 characters at the beginning of the book. They have appeared 3 times. Only one of those appearances had really any character development or plot. And now they're taking them and they're completely reforging them. They might as well be something entirely different.
Exactly.
And I feel like that is the 90s in a nutshell, because we really do see these characters. We see, Dartalon, which is a pretty okay name. But we see these characters all getting, rebuilt and reformed. And one of them is now an elf, and one of them is a porcupine.
Yeah, Porcupine Pete.
And their costumes are all. Yeah. And that's the thing. Porcupine Pete exists. Yeah. But this guy doesn't. Well.
Okay. So the heroes of LaLore, your complaint is there's only 4 of them.
There's only 4 of them.
Here's what you do.
Okay.
This pink-headed guy with the vision here, with the elf ears. Elf ears vision. The cloner.
Dr. Clonus, yes.
He's a controller. Dr. Cloner, the controller. You give the heroes of LaLore a character that is their boss, their overseer, their who is it in Justice League? Is it not Eberron? Who's the little person? Oberon. You give them that, or you give them a puck character that is there to kind of be the sidekick assistant. You give them some hard ass controller who's trying to control them and telling them to get on these missions. You can do that with 4 people plus 2 that are kind of like, oh, I guess Max Lord has to get in trouble again and we have to save him. So you can do all of that without having to go all the way into this Wanderers area. This is the first time I've ever read The Wanderers, and I despised it from page 1.
Doug Moench is one of those guys who likes to really delve into the psychology of his stories, because right before this one, he had done a book called Electric Warrior.
And I remember that. Let me look and see if I'm familiar with Electric Warrior.
Yeah, because Electric Warrior is the story of, I don't know, a future sort of Native American Aborigine man named Derek who gets killed and transformed into a cyborg, but he's like merged together with a robot, and it's a whole thing. And it really does kind of
I didn't read this one either.
It takes a little mysticism, a little cultural imperialism. It takes a little bit of fetishization of the Native American, and then it kind of slaps it into this, this futuristic William Gibson setting, and it just
voiced by Rosie Greer.
Right. It just sort of all comes together into 18 issues of what? But I remember reading it in the 80s and thinking, whoa.
Well, but you also have to think at the same time, we're getting Swamp Thing, right? We're starting to see, Constantine. We're starting to see the the Hellblazer type stuff.
Yeah. Had this book come out a few years later, it might have been a Vertigo. It could have been a Vertigo science fiction book. And I feel like might have been more successful than trying to push it into a Legion of Superheroes.
Backdoor pilot. It basically is a backdoor pilot. It's like that one time that this character showed up on Happy Days, and now we're going to make that
Barry
an entire...
moved in next door to the Brady's and adopted 3 boys.
Yeah, and now we got their whole show off that. I don't care for this at all. I mean, it's an interesting premise that the cloner and everything that's going on, but is this going to end like the heck was that series where every episode the hero died? It wasn't OMAC.
Eon Flux.
Well, kind of like Eon Flux, yes. But there was a comic book series that the guy would die, and then he would just be waking up into his other body, his other clone body. And I don't know if I'm thinking of OMAC or one of the Valiant characters or something like that. But that's the shtick that I kind of expect going forward. Oh, we got killed. Oh, we're awake. We're only missing the last few hours of our lives.
Yeah, that might have been a better series. The thing about it is that issue 3 and issue 5 are very Legion-centric and Legion-heavy. And as this is a Legion show, I felt like throwing in issue 1 would do 2 things. 1, it would allow us to kind of have a little bit of background. And 2, it would just irritate the hell out of you. And boy, did it do that good.
And so the other question that I had for our listeners couple of episodes ago was, what about Rebels? What about Rebels 94 and Rebels 95? I mean, technically you've got a Vril Drox on there. That is that's a Legion kind of tie-in, or so do we cover Rebels when that pops up or not? And it's like, I don't know, man.
That sounds like something that we should probably crowdsource, because...
No, I asked people to respond and they didn't respond. So when I ask questions out to the listeners, by all means, answer, dear listeners, or else we can't incorporate your feedback into future shows. So what are you just sitting there waiting for? Get onto your tappy machine and tappy out an answer to us. Podcast at majorspoilers.com, or
and make it quick, because I don't want to reread Legion 89.
Or go over to our Discord server that you can join for free and get in the Legion Clubhouse channel and hang out with some of our cooler members. Who's hanging out in there now? We've got I don't even know how to say this person's name. RMD, I guess is how I'm going to say it. Smikey is in there. Who else is in there? J. Michael T, Cosmo Memory, all those cool, Jimbo Fett, all those cool people are hanging out over there, and they want to talk with you right now. We're kind of like the comment section in the early days of DC Comics before everyone realized that, oh no, we probably shouldn't try to connect young kids with other adults because that's just predatory. But this is kind of like that, where it's like, oh, I like the Legion of Superheroes, but I don't know where to go. Well, come on into our Discord, dear listener, and you can meet like-minded people just like you. Yeah, we do not make it predatory. Everybody's really cool over there. You can trust us on this one, bro. So yeah, we are fortunately not reviewing every issue of The Wanderers because I would probably jump off.
And there's that whole issue of The Wanderers where the guy who turns into birds sleeps with a bunch of birds in order to repopulate all the birds of a planet and has a lot of bird sex.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's where we are ending it this week. Next time on the show, is another hero dead? Or is it just a rumor? And that's right, more of The Wanderers next time on the Legion Clubhouse.
The Legion Clubhouse is a production of Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC, and is produced by Steven Schleicher. Your hosts were Matthew Peterson and Steven Schleicher. You can follow Matthew at Mighty King Cobra and Steven at Major Spoilers. You can follow this podcast on Twitter at Legion Clubhouse. If you have questions or comments, send them to podcast@majorspoilers.com. I'm Jason Inman. Until next time, eat it, Grandpa.
This podcast is copyright 2025 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.